Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next Foreman community demo, number 45. I'm starting to track these now. It makes for unique titles in the forum. That's literally the only reason. Anyway, it's going to be a short day today. We've got a short interval. It's only been 2 weeks since the last demo. That's mainly to try and sync things up with when people are finishing bits of work. We were getting a bit out of line, and it was meaning we didn't really have any content. So, pointless doing a demo. So it's a short interval this time, but we've still got some good things for you. Got some container stuff, we've got some Foreman backup stuff, some Overt stuff. I'm going to talk a little bit about the forum as well. And then we'll be back to the normal 3-week schedule. The usual reminders: you can interact with the show, come and talk to us on #theforeman on Freenode or Matrix, or you can use the YouTube live chat, and I can keep an eye on that for your questions there as well. If you're watching on YouTube, well, I guess you are watching on YouTube, it's the only place you can watch it. Don't forget to check the settings and upgrade the quality of the stream, because for some reason it defaults to a really low number and we can't control it. And it makes it really hard to read text. So what have I got to talk about today? I've already mentioned the agenda. Very important thing that I do need to bring to your attention, though. Foreman now has a privacy policy. You will be familiar with just about everybody else in the world doing this right now, thanks to GDPR and other reasons as well. Actually, GDPR was a bit of a catalyst, but there's been plenty of good privacy legislation about for a long time. For those of you who don't know me that well, this is a huge area of interest for me. I try and follow tech policy and the interaction between tech and politicians and lawmaking and so on. I'm not a lawyer, but it's very interesting to me, and I feel like I know a reasonable amount. And a lot of people are getting GDPR very, very wrong. Good news for Foreman is we didn't really need to change anything. We were already doing everything right, pretty much. We aren't really using people's data at all. The website is static, and the forum and the bug track and so on, you have to explicitly sign up to anyway. About the only changes we've made are to remove some tracking that accidentally got introduced via one of the slide presentations, so that's gone. And we've anonymized IPs within Google Analytics, so that's not being stored anymore either. So a very slight improvement, but realistically speaking, we weren't doing anything particularly badly before anyway. So there's nothing really new or surprising or exciting in there, but you can go and have a read of it. And if you do have any questions or concerns, do come and talk to me or any of the people in the forum community, and we can try and sort those things out. But I'm hopeful that that there's nobody going to be surprised about the things that we're doing. We do commit, obviously, to if anything changes in that, we'll keep it up to date. We'll let you know. But realistically, the only thing I can think on the horizon is that I'd like to dump Google Analytics and get an open source analytics package in there. Puic is pretty nice, so I've been looking into that. But anyway, that's a big announcement done. Go read it if you care. Hopefully, you're fine with it. What else do I have to talk to you about? Releases 1.17.1. was out 2 days ago. Thanks very much to Andre for that. Release manager is a thankless task, and he puts a lot of work into it. So thanks very much for that. Daniel, I think, was saying that 1.16.2 is going to be out soon, but I asked him this morning and he didn't answer me as to what soon means. But I don't think it'll be very long. I know there's people waiting on fixes. We know both of those releases have taken quite a while. There's some discussions going on in the development category if you want to come and have a look about lessons we can learn from this. But it's coming. And I did the newsletter this morning. It'll be out this afternoon. There's about 15 plugins been updated in the last few weeks. So yeah, nuts. Lots of stuff going on in that space there. Quick note on upcoming events. We've got Open Source Camp in 2 weeks' time in Berlin. So if you're in the area, come see us. We're going to have a booth. We've got speakers. Greylog are involved, so there's going to be a whole day's worth of sort of infrastructure talks, and it's on the back of OSDC, so you can get 3 days worth of conferences in for your travel budget. So come talk to us. We'd like to see you. All right, enough wittering on from me. I'm going to go to our first speaker, and Ori's going to tell us what's happening with Overt at the moment. Ori, you with us?
Yeah, thanks. So for those of you that have been using Overt as a compute resource, you probably noticed that since Overt 4 came out, we've still been using API v3. We actually, until now, did not have any integration with the API v4 of Overt. API v3 has been deprecated since 4.0. And for people that were still adding the compute resource for Overt 4.0 and further on, would actually have to specify in the URL that they are using API v3. So if I choose Overt, you would put in your example. API v3. So that's what you had to do until now. Now you'll notice this new checkbox here. This checkbox was actually added by Ivan to support the new API v4. So we now do have an integration with v4. As you can see, it's experimental. So the first version comes out with Foreman 118. We'd be glad for people to test it and open bugs, give feedback on how it's working. It is just the first version, so it's still experimental. For now, what happens is when you used to use v3, you don't need to anymore. You have your regular URL, and if you don't click that, that will actually go to v3, even if you're on Overt 4. If you do click it, then it will go to API v4, so obviously only on Overt 4 machines. You can see that, again, if you actually go to your compute resources. I have one here that I've already saved. Of course, this was working before, but when you can edit it, you will actually be able to see that it says that it's using API v4, and there will be a yes there. And that's how you can see that it is using v4. The URL, like I said, will stay exactly the same. That's it.
Super. Not really much to add to that. Nice and straightforward. Yeah, I can't add anything to that. I'm looking forward to the API v4 integration. Obviously, it's been coming for a while, so it's going to be nice to have. So yeah, I'll just add to echo what Ori already said. Come tell us if it works, because we really need it. So it'd be really great to hear people's reactions to it. Okay, moving on to Tom then, who's got 2 pieces of content for us today. So he's basically going to be my entire show, and thank you very much for that straight away. But we're going to start with container mirroring. So let's do that.
Hello. So yeah, I'm going to do 2 things. I'll just do them back to back. Actually, I have 4 items, but I did save 2 for the next demo. So first thing I'll talk about is mirroring container image names. And so if you've used container images, Docker images in Foreman at all, you know that when you sync from a remote registry into a product repository, we change the names. Mangle is perhaps the nice way to, instead of a swear word. So here's an example of an image that I've synced down from a registry. And the pattern is, as you can see, organization, label, lifecycle label, content view label, product label, repository label. It's really long, right? And ideally, when I sync from a foreign registry, I'd like to serve that image up in its original name. Now, even in other registries, so if you make a custom registry on Docker Hub or Quay, you'll be namespaced there. So if you imported this image, OpenShift 3 Cryo, into your own registry in Docker Hub, it'd still be namespaced to you. Again, that works for some cases, but if we look at, this is the repo discovery in Foreman, and you can see on Red Hat's registry, there are 800 images. And even if you just want to sync the OpenShift ones, there are 80 of those. So that's a lot of names to have to push through this munging. So what I've done is I've added to lifecycle environments, I've added a field called registry name pattern. And effectively it's an ERB text field where you can configure how you want your images named. So there are some of the models you have access to. So organization label, repository, this is the Docker upstream name. So this is the original registry name it came from. And you can combine these in any way you want. Here's some examples. So in this case, I'm using the organization label followed by a slash and then the repository's upstream name. Okay, so in this case, in the previous example, this would be what I would Docker pull. Okay, and you might see 2 slashes here. that is valid syntax. Not a lot of registries take advantage of that, let's say, but you can. So the only caveats are in making these names across your environments, they have to be unique. So you can't have in two different orgs or content views, you can't end up with the same name. So this name can only exist in one place. So there's plenty of warnings. It won't let you get into that state. But if you do see that warning, someone else in the group, a different org, is using a pattern that ends up with the same name. That's the only sort of thing to look out for. So let me show you real quick in the UI. So this is my development environment. And you can see the pattern I specified here. Lifecycle environment label, and then the repository upstream name. And if I go over here, so this is one of the tags on RHEL 7. And so you can see it's in several different environments, including a library. And in my development environment, you can see it's called development, which is the environment label, / and then the original name, RHEL 7, and then tag 7.5. But you can see in the production environment, it's just RHEL 7.5. So now any external tooling that I need to pull in to reference this, it can just keep the original name. So whether I'm pointing at Red Hat's registry, or if I'm pointing at Quay or Docker, whatever registry you're using, I'm pointing at Foreman, I can just keep the same name. And this also works on smart proxies. So these names are maintained as it's mirrored across to smart proxies. So you can distribute registry with no changes. So that is it for this little topic. Any questions, find me on IRC. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I don't see anything just now. You say they have to be unique across the whole instance. Presumably then, is there you showed some good examples. Is there kind of a recommended component to use that you're going to sort of, I hesitate to use the word guarantee, right? Because it's a really strong word.
Yeah.
But you know, something like
for me,
ticket tag where you reckon you can be pretty confident that it's going to be unique.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't fill in the field at all, it just reverts to the original, right? The mangled name, okay, which is guaranteed to be unique.
Sure.
So for me and my example corporation here, I want to set up a production environment so that my consumers only get the images and the tags, in fact. So I use content view filters to reduce the tags.
Oh.
And so that's where I want to have the original label maintained. The other environments, you know, maybe I'll just leave those blank. It's nice to have the environment names in there, but yeah. But if you simple registry, you could just set it on library. So all the images, but you'd want to have just one org and no lifecycle environments. Like if you just wanted a straight mirror. Yeah,
that makes sense. Cool. Yeah. Okay, good. Let me quickly switch back to the slides so I can find the time codes later, because that's how I do it. You know, I look for the blue bits in the video stream when I'm pulling out the time codes. Okay, so more container stuff then.
Hello again. Yeah. So in the existing code, and I think even in the previous release of Foreman and Catello, this feature worked. This is effectively in Foreman, you can't Docker push against the registry. So it's a read-only, pull-only registry backed by Pulp and Crane. So, which is awkward if you're disconnected from your source registry. In other words, I want to sync images from Red Hat's container catalog, but I'm in a disconnected network. How do I do that? So what we're going to do is we're going to use Scopio, which is a tool written to effectively replace the Docker command line. There are other tools related to it, Podman, for example. But Scopio is sort of a low-level tool used to pull images around. I gave a link there of where it's on the Atomic project. So it supports a wide variety of formats. So you can use Scopio to copy, for example, from a Docker registry to your Docker daemon. You could use it to copy from your Docker daemon to file format, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use the dir copy type, which effectively writes the container image to disk. And then for us, in our case, we have to tar up that directory and then deliver it up to Foreman. So again, the primary usage are for disconnected transfer, if you want to sneaker-net it across things. And the functionality is equivalent to Docker push. It's not as clean, let's say. So there's a few more steps than simple Docker push, but it's fully functional. It'll get the job done. So here I just have an example of the command line. You can see I'm copying from a Docker registry to a directory, and you can see the output here. And then this is what it actually writes to disk, effectively 2 layers, and then the manifest describing those layers. And then this is a little Scopio version file. And then for us, we're going to do this all through Hammer. There's no UI component for this. So we're going to tar up the files that Scopio wrote out. And then it's a 2-step process to upload. Well, let me caveat that a little bit. There's 1-step process to upload, but then to reference that image, it's convenient to have a tag with it. So you can always, with the Docker commands or Scopio commands, you can always reference things by their long digest. But tags are how most people want to reference things, you know, latest. So here I'm uploading it, and then the message, the success message is important in this case, because getting the digest will let us tag it. So without that little bit of information, you've got to go to the UI, find the digest, and then come back to the command line to tag it. Okay, so we do a repository upload content, and then we do a repository update specifying the Docker tag 1.28, and then the Docker digest. So again, it's a couple steps, but fully functional. The nice thing about the more recent versions of the container image formats is that you can have multiple tags associated with a single image. So for example, I have this, I've tagged it 1.28. I could also tag it as latest as well, and they both point to the same image. Sorry, I'm just looking to see if there's any questions there. So let me just do a quick example here. I do have a little script I wrote that effectively queries the registry, finds all the tags for an image, and then builds up, creates all the tar files. You can see this is sort of the output. So I'm just going to use one of the existing outputs. And I'm going to do an upload. I have all these in my command history, of course, because I made sure the demo worked yesterday. Knock on wood, right, Ori?
You're very well prepared. You're doing my job for me too if you're checking for questions. I'm just going to go get a coffee. You got this.
I actually did have a tab open before to show that, but my laptop crashed before the demo.
So I just uploaded the content here, and you can see, again, I get the digest back. Then so let me do I'm going to do the update. What am I going to do? Tag. Again, I pulled down tag 1.27, but I can call it whatever I want. Let me just copy this. And we should be successful. Okay, let's go check the UI. So one note, I'm uploading the content to an existing repository of Docker type. So that does have to be created beforehand as well. So you have to have an existing repository to upload to. Again, you can do that with the hammer commands, or you can do it any way you want. In my case, I made a product called Jenkins Builds, and again, the repository name Jenkins Builds. So this is just the place where my OpenShift pipeline can dump images to via scripted ways. And there we go. We got my tag. So that is it, I think.
Superb. That is really nice, I have to say. Yeah, don't really have a lot to add. Oh, hang on. Ivan's got a question, but I think he's lagging a bit behind because he's talking about patterns per environment, which I would imagine is your previous installment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me. So effectively, the user has to sort of have a topology in mind. Okay, well, how do they want to structure their environments, their images?
Yeah.
So there's no magic to it at all. So when I set a registry pattern name on an environment, it applies to all the content views in that environment and then all the Docker repositories in those content views.
Yeah.
So it'll apply across the board. Now this is ERB, so you can do some fun little logic in there. You could say if the repository URL is comes from registry.redhat.access.com or wherever, you could say, okay, well then in that case change the name. Otherwise, just use the original. So you can do clever things in that registry name pattern, but again, it's entirely up to you to find the right balance in how you want to structure it.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much, Tom. That's some fantastic content there for all you container users. We're gonna switch gears slightly now. We're going to talk a little bit about Foreman Maintain. Obviously, we saw a deep dive about Foreman Maintain, how to work on it a couple of days ago. This is actually down how to use it, I believe. So Martin, what do you got for us?
So hello. I'm Martin, and I'm going to talk a bit about backup and restore that were recently moved in Foreman Maintain. In the last couple of months, I was participating in two efforts. One is support for remote databases, where we wanted to add support in installer and various tools for remote databases. We are currently supporting Postgres for Foreman and Candlepin, and Mongo for Pulp, and these databases could live on different servers. The other effort is migration of various scripts and tools that are spread on various places in Foreman and Catalog, and we want to move them into the Foreman Maintain, which should give it a unified interface and unified look, also some documentation, and basically one place to look for the tools, so that users are not lost in the number of various tools. Okay, so these two efforts met in moving backup and restore into Foreman Maintain, and currently we have catalog backup moved and catalog restored moved into the Foreman Maintain. And there are some usability issues fixed, and it also supports remote databases, which was the main point. I will show you how the backup and restore look like, and maybe tell you some more details about how it works with remote databases. So if you call Foreman Maintain with -h for help, you'll see the basic commands that it offers, and you can see at the top level there are backup and restore commands. We'll look more at the backup first, and you can see that the backup has 3 subcommands. these three subcommands represents different strategies for how the backup would be done. And I'll shortly explain the options. One is online, which is more for some debugging purposes. This backup is done by dumping data from various places. It takes configuration files and some metadata from the system, but the main point is that the server is up. All the services are running, so you don't have any downtime. But the con is that the consistency of the data cannot be ensured. So this is only really for debugging purposes. It's not for later restoring of corrupted system. Then the other strategy is offline, which is the basic backup. During the offline backup, we'll turn all the services down, do the backup of all the data and config files and metadata. Then the system is restored during the sorry, not restored, but restarted. And during the time that we take a backup, we are turning on the maintenance mode, so the server doesn't respond to any HTTP request. Basically, there are some new chain for IP tables, and the traffic is not allowed on the server. The last strategy is snapshot. This is useful for basically shorter downtime of the server, because we are just turning off the services and take snapshots of the file systems with the data. Then the services are turned on, and we start with the backup from the snapshots. This basically makes it possible to have the maintenance window as short as possible, and the data are safe and consistency is ensured. So now I will show you how some sample backup look like. We can see some options that we have. These are most of them is common for all the strategies, so I'll show you just the online backup. Yeah, you can see here they are quite self-explanatory. Yeah, interesting is skip pulp content, which means that we don't back up the pulp data, basically. There is also the -p or preserve directory, which puts the backup in the directory where you want it to have. Otherwise, it will create a name of the backup directory with some timestamp for you. Yeah, there is also support for incremental backups, so that you can do some full backup, and some of the backups that are following in the following days, perhaps, could be just storing the differences, so the backup files are much smaller. Okay, so we can run the online backup. I will do backup in TMP and let the tool create the timestamp directory for me. Yeah, so we can see that it's doing some sanity checks at the beginning. It's checking whether the services are, the database services are up and accessible, and that we have the tools necessary for doing the online backup of Mongo. And then you can see that it will create the directory, check it's readable, and collecting some metadata and config files, pulp data, Mongo, and Postgres. Then the data are compressed. At the beginning, there is notice where the data are stored, and that's basically it. For the restore of this data, I won't run it because it's taking a long time, but it's very similar. You will just use foreman maintain restore and edit path to the backup directory that we just created. It will reset the installation on the system, replace the data with the files from backup, and rerun the installer above on top of that. So it will use the configuration files and everything from the backup, and the system is restored. And now I can tell you big things, some things about how remote databases are handled, because in usual scenario when the database are local, we are just doing tarballs of the directories where the databases are stored. It's warlib PostgreSQL for Postgres, and I guess warlib Mongo for Mongo. We can't do that for remote databases, so we are doing a dump of the databases and store them, which is similar to the online backup. But the difference is that when we are backup in offline strategy, all the services at the satellite or foreman server are down, and only the databases are up, so the data consistency can be ensured. So that's basically it. Are there any questions or comments?
Yes, a few. So firstly, Eric would like to know if this is Catella specific, or will this work for vanilla Foreman?
Yeah, the goal is that it works for vanilla Foreman too. There is some issue currently in restore that we are working on, but yeah, the goal is that it could be used for vanilla Foreman and also for proxy itself.
Superb. Good answer. I have a question as well. For the snapshot backups, you mentioned this is a file system snapshot. Are we talking about LVM here, or are we talking about file systems like ZFS and so on? Yeah,
the snapshots are doing through LVM.
LVM, right? Okay, cool. I just thought it seemed like the obvious choice, but because you said file system rather than because obviously LVM is lower level than file system, right? So, so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, I don't see any other questions just now. I'm just going to check the main Foreman channel. Nope, that seems to be everything for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that brings us on to me. It was a short demo this time, so I thought we've been using our forum for 5 months now. We started on the 1st of January. Plus a few of us were playing with it before then, so 5 or 6 months depending on how you look at it. And I thought now might be a good time, since we had a quiet demo anyway, to maybe just pass on a few interesting little tips and tricks that I've found along the way that people might not be aware of. There are some quirks of the UI where there's actually some really useful functionality that's really hidden. So I thought it might be nice to show some of that off. So let me just quickly switch to my browser window here. Wait a minute, something's not right here. Oh, I see what the problem is. Yes, there we go. So that's that one. There we go. So this is just standard view of the forum, and I'm just going to walk through a couple of things that you might not know about. Probably the most important thing, if you take anything away from this, these first two are the ones I want you to be aware of. So I'm going to start with log formatting. This comes up a lot for people posting support queries, and fair enough. If you're new to the Foreman community, you won't have seen this video, but it's worth knowing about. So I'm going to pick this topic here, And if I go back up to the top, here we are, a stack trace. This is the sort of thing to look at. This is what you want to see when you're browsing the UI, right? But what a lot of people do is they just post text straight in. So I'm going to show you how to fix that. So let me edit this post. I'm not going to save this edit, but I'm going to show you how it looks. So he's done this as a quote, which is fine. You can just indent the whole thing, which works. But if I just delete a couple of characters here, you can see this is what you often get. I'm going to bring this up a little bit more. There we go. So this is what you tend to see in people's posts, particularly when they're new to the forum. And nobody wants to see that, quite frankly. It makes it really hard to get to the end of the post and nothing else. The easiest way for you to fix this is to do the same thing that you would do in Markdown for code formatting. So 3 backticks there, and then go to the end of your block, and 3 backticks at the end. Go. And then you get this lovely indented block that scrolls nicely on the right, and the rest of your post continues down here. So that's point number 1 I wanted to make. Obviously, when you're posting things, you won't have edit rights like I do as an admin, so you'll have to make sure you do this at the beginning, or at least within a few minutes of making the post. But it does just make everything nicer, and it's obviously you get some syntax highlighting. Again, this is straight on Markdown, so you can actually change this. I don't think there is actually a dedicated log highlighter, but if you're posting code, obviously you can put Ruby in here and it'll highlight it appropriately. So useful things to do when formatting posts. That's post number 1. Point number 1. The second thing I wanted to point out, and this comes up quite a lot. I picked this issue for a reason. Note the title, 2 issues with Foreman callback. So what's happened here is a user has posted a query, and in this case, it's debatable whether he actually has 2 separate issues or not, but I'm not going to go into that. But you do sometimes get a situation where you want to split a discussion, right, where you don't want to derail the thread, but you do want to continue with a discussion that has started on the side. And the best way to do this, but nobody knows it's there because it's so hidden, if you go to the end of your thread and you hit reply, there is this little arrow button here, and what's not obvious is it is actually a button, and you can change this and say reply as linked topic. Stuff. So you can start a new topic, and straight away it's giving you a link to the previous discussion, and then you can carry on with the discussion that you started on the side without derailing the discussion in the main thread. This is super useful when these things happen. They don't happen that often. Most of our discussions are single thread, but when it does happen, this is the quickest way to fix it. So I wanted to pass that information on. What else was I going to mention? So the next one is to do with groups. So I think most of us are aware of groups by now, but I just wanted to remind people that they're here. You're going to see a lot of groups here. So there's lots and lots of groups, and you can click join if you're interested in that area. And then when someone notifies a group, you'll get a mention, and that might be to do with development of a particular group, or it might be to do with support for a particular group. So if you think you can help out, I'll give a great example. Chris Roberts came to me a few weeks ago and said, hey, can we have a VMware group, because I really want to help out with that stuff. And I was very, very happy to create a VMware group for him and a couple of other people who joined it, and that's great, right? So again, if a group doesn't exist and you want one, ask an admin. We can create it for you very, very easily. So that's groups, nothing new there. The last 2 I wanted to mention are to do with plugins. So as you know, we're now using Discourse for all our events. And I wanted to just quickly run through a couple of ways in which you can use the events system. So you have the agenda, you have the calendar. For the events that have got a location, you can also get it as a map, which is kind of nice. But what not everyone's aware of, and not everyone will want to do, it's completely optional, there is also a users map. So yes, let's go to users. Now, again, this is public information. Only do this if you're comfortable with it. But here is a few people who've put their location information in. So there's me, obviously, in Scotland. There's Matthias in Germany. There's Ale over here in Japan. So, only a few people have discovered this. It's a fairly new feature. I only added it about 2 weeks ago. If you are comfortable with this, and please only if you are comfortable with this, it would be really interesting information, just because it helps us know where the community are and where to plan events and things like this. You can get to it from your preferences. So that is, where is it? To our profile. You can put in a location here. So so that's then geocoded and done. So So that's fun. I'd be very interested to see if anyone wants to do that. That'd be cool. And then the last one I wanted to mention was about events themselves, because I think quite a few people are missing this. There's 2 ways you can subscribe to events. So if you want the whole calendar, there's both an RSS feed and a webcal link here on the main calendar. But, and what not everybody realizes, is if you go into an event, so let's go to today's demo. There's an add to calendar button here, which you can then click Google Calendar and add it directly to your Google Calendar. This is really useful if you, obviously you can get an ICS file as well for any other client. But this link here I find very useful, since I know a lot of people use Google Calendar. So this is a great way to just add a single link to your Google Calendar. It's worth mentioning, of course, that that Google can quite happily pass this link as well. You can add the entire calendar to your Google Calendar as well, if that helps you. So if you want to be sure you're not missing anything, that's 2 good ways to get hold of that information. And I did just see someone sent me a message. I'm going to check what that was. Yeah, so it was just someone agreeing with me about the thread splitting. I can't talk anymore, apparently. So there's tons more interesting things. Oh, yes, sorry, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. There's tons. We could do this all day, right? But there's one last thing. Support makes use of the solved plugin, so you get these check marks when people mark a thread as solved. I've shown that in the past. I have added this unsolved button up here. So if you are looking for things to get involved in, you want to help close some issues, I don't know, you can click this button and it will hide all the ones that have been solved. It's literally just adding this solved equals no parameter to the URL. And sadly, it doesn't highlight it. It still says latest. That's not easy to fix, it turns out. But at least you've got that. Likewise, if we go to the RFCs category, so development RFCs, we have a similar thing. We haven't started using this yet, but we had a discussion about how to track RFCs. And the proposal is that once an author is happy with the state of the RFC and wants to see if it's acceptable, he can add a poll to the RFC, at which point I will, or an admin will come and add the voting tag. And that doesn't really do anything because that tag's not in use yet. And likewise, we have accept as well. So you can see it's just changing this parameter up here. So we can change the tags as we go, and then you can filter the RFCs category by what you're looking for. If people need or want this kind of functionality in other parts of the forum, let me know. It's very easy to add. It's just a piece of custom JavaScript in the forum settings, so not difficult at all. Yes, okay, so that is everything I wanted to show you. So let me switch back to my slides. I'll just check there weren't any questions about that. Good. Okay, so this has been the community demo for the end of May. I hope you'll join us again in June for the next one. Until then, you can find us on Foreman Freenode and on Matrix. We have a community there, on YouTube, and all the other places as well. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Do take care.